Back with a Fox News alert, a 17-year-old migrant died in U.S. custody this week after entering the country from Honduras without a parent or guardian. His cause of death is still unknown. The Department of Health and Human Services says a medical examiner investigation is underway. Now, a new report reveals a 4-year-old child from Honduras also died in HHS custody. This happened back in March, but it went unreported. Here to react is former senior DEA special agent and global director of counter-narcotics technology at Rigaku Analytical Devices, Michael W. Brown. Thanks for being with us, Michael. You hear these two stories of these two children who have died in custody of HHS. What are your thoughts?
Well, these are the foreseeable and regrettable consequences of the cartel's control of the border and their ability to simply flood, thousands of children across the border, and who knows what their medical condition is. So unfortunately, until we have a better policy that can deter the cartels from managing this human trafficking wave, I think we're going to, unfortunately, continue to see, young children die.
Now, let's put this into context on the vulnerability here for these children in the United States of America. There's 8,672 unaccompanied minors right now, it's estimated, in HHS custody. Just to follow up on this quickly, Michael, so much talk a few years ago about the conditions where minors have been held, kids in cages, and here we have kids dying in custody. Someone, you would think, at some point, somewhere, has to be held accountable.
Well, you would think in 2022, roughly 130,000 unaccompanied children came across the border. What services or strategy has been put in place to safeguard those children? And if there is one, why isn't it being used now to manage this roughly 9,000 children that have come across the border already?
Yeah, let's move to this as well. The Mexican president says there's an uptick of smugglers at the U.S. border. He expects this as Title 42 ends. We're going to see a flood. We've already seen reports are 26,000 people who have amassed at the Mexican southern border, or the American-Mexican southern border. Here is Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador on the role, as you brought up earlier, Michael, of cartels. He said there are more smugglers than usual, many human traffickers. A lot of migrant smugglers are offering to take migrants to the border for $8,000 or $10,000, saying that starting today they can enter the U.S. freely, and that is a lie, a manipulation. Is it a lie? Is it a manipulation? I mean, people are coming in record numbers, and we don't know how many are released or how many gotaways we get. I don't know if the cartel is selling a false bill of goods to these customers. There's a lot of success in what they're delivering illegal immigrants.
Well, I think you have to give the cartels credit. They understand what they're doing. They've been doing this a long time. They are experts in the field of human trafficking and narcotics trafficking. And it's my understanding they're even using social media to get the word out that the border is open. Now, regardless of whether it's open or not, the reality is tens of thousands of individuals believe it is open, and therefore they will be coming to that border.
You can see on the wall behind me, as Michael and I talk, you can see the American southern border where some of these ports of entry are experiencing greater numbers of illegal immigrants coming through to the United States of America. Let's leave it with this, Michael. I'd love, Title 42 just ended. We're seeing a surge. What's your prediction for what we'll see going forward in the coming weeks and months?
Well, in terms of the surge, I think we're going to continue to see the numbers increase. But more importantly, I think we're going to see a dramatic increase in the production and distribution of fentanyl as CBP resources are drawn away from the official checkpoints to manage the administrative overflow. The cartels will see this as an opportunity to smuggle in millions of fentanyl tablets, which, of course, may raise the overdose rate and the death mortality rate associated with fentanyl usage.
All right, Michael W. Brown, great to have you on the program this morning. We appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Pete, over to you.
All right, thank you, Will. We begin with this on the other side of the room. It's official. NBC Universal's former head of advertising will be the new Twitter CEO. Elon Musk says Linda Yaccardi starts in 6 weeks and will focus primarily on business operations. Musk will still be involved with the company and will serve as the chief technology officer. He also said as soon as the new CEO is ready, they will hold a virtual chat on Twitter where people can, quote, ask them anything. And now to an update on Jamie Foxx. The actor's daughter revealing her dad is on the mend after an undisclosed medical complication last month. Kareen Foxx made the announcement in a now deleted Instagram post yesterday saying, "My dad has been out of the hospital for weeks recuperating. In fact, he was playing pickleball yesterday." It's good. And calling all Kyles. The city of Kyle, Texas is inviting everyone named Kyle to visit next weekend for the 4th year in a row.
Hey y'all, I'm Kyle Park and I'm here calling all Kyles to come to Kyle, Texas, where we'll attempt to break the world record of the most Kyles gathered ever.
More than 2,325 Kyles will need to turn out to break the current record for the largest same-name gathering. People of all ages are welcome. And if you don't have an ID that proves your name is Kyle, your mom and dad can vouch for you. So you can bring your mom and dad and they'll say his name is Kyle. I know a few Kyles. Make the trip. Will, how far is Kyle, Texas from a major airport?
Man, I was just in there thinking, I'm not positive where Kyle, Texas is.
Okay, we're going to look that up. We're going to let you know. So if you're Kyle and you're watching, you too can be a record-breaking, you can be in the Guinness Book of World Records. I like it.
Calling all Kyles.
Calling all Kyles. All right. Coming up, climate change activists are coming for coal. The new regulations that could shut down fossil fuel power plants if they don't cut emissions by 90%. Plus, could your future... Welcome back. The Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, proposed new pollution standards this week. And, you know, it sounds nerdy, but it's important. Under the Clean Air Act, the new rules would drastically affect new gas and existing coal-fired power plants. Over the next 20 years, it would limit 617 million metric tons of carbon dioxide. That's like cutting the annual emissions for roughly half the cars in the U.S. It also requires natural gas plants to update their technology to reduce 90% of emissions by 2035 or be forced to shut down. What does this mean for the future of fossil-fueled power plants? Well, let's ask U.S. Oil and Gas Association President Tim Stewart. Tim, I say nerdy, that's not really the right word. What I mean is it's a lot of talk of percentages and reductions, but it's really radical stuff in the implications it'll have on our country.
It really is. You know, first what it will do is it'll kill the coal generation that we have, and it will force, as you say, these natural gas plants to, in just 10 years, Pete, to either design or develop or implement green, new green hydrogen technology, which costs 4 times as much, or just shut down. You know, those are technologies that don't exist yet, or if they are, they're in the they're just early stages and are not cost effective, and they're not feasible, and they never may be. Natural gas was supposed to be that bridge fuel to the future, but what we see now, and we were responsible for over 60% of the reductions of our CO2 over the last 10 years, that bridge fuel, but the Biden administration is burning that bridge right down in front of us, and as we're all crossing over to greener technologies. This rule is likely going to break the grid. It certainly will make it far more unreliable.
I like that analogy. So we're burning down the bridge before we've crossed to the other side with no technology yet reliable enough or cheap enough to make it something we can use. You say break the grid. What do you mean? Does that mean we're going to, as we push toward electric, we don't have enough power generation?
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, right now, several parts of the North American grid are already at elevated risks of energy shortfalls. And what the administration is doing is they're putting out this horrible confluence of events ahead of us in 10 years. They're telling Americans that within 10 years, over 60% of our baseload generation, including natural gas, is going to be replaced by technology that really doesn't exist yet. At the same time, automakers are being told that in 10 years, 75% of your EV, or 75% of your vehicles are going to be EVs powered by an electricity on a grid that doesn't necessarily exist yet. And so we may end up looking like a third world country where tens of millions of Americans are going to be subjected to rolling brownouts all day, every year long. It really is a frightening scenario.
Tim, does it kind of scare you that maybe they want it that way? Maybe they don't care that there's not a plan on the other side? Everyone's just going to have to live with less. That's how we contribute to the climate battle.
I think we all should be scared. That's absolutely it. You know, we wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt, but those actions they've taken over the last 2 years just really shows they prefer to blow everything up and build something up better that are different than what we're used to right now. And it's frightening to all of us, I think.
And rely on other countries like the Communist Chinese to fill the gap because we blew our bridge up.
fill that gap with both energy but also technology too. Why we're turning our entire grid reliability over to the Chinese for the next 15 or 20 years is really disturbing to all of us, yes.
It's amazing. These are the types of rules that get written in the middle of the night, that don't get a lot of headlines, that have massive implications in the future and are driven by a radical climate zealot administration. Tim Stewart, thanks for fighting back. We appreciate you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. They really live up to that tagline right now. For me, it's the realization, like, we put all these filters on, and you're like, okay, I want my kids to be able to just have a little bit of freedom to watch stuff. And then you're like, no.
Or how about just the freedom to be kids and not think about these, the problems that troubled adults have are being injected into their cartoons. It's really scary.
No, we're ripping innocence away, and that's
they're being robbed of their childhood innocence. Sad.
All right, up next, 2024 Republican candidate Vivek Ramaswamy wants to raise the voting age from 18 to 25, with a few exceptions. But how would that play out with Gen Z voters? We'll ask a group of them in our live panel coming up next.
2024 GOP hopeful Vivek Ramaswamy is raising eyebrows with young voters after proposing the idea to raise the voting age from 18 to 25. He says you can vote at 18 if you serve in the military or as a first responder for 6 months, or at least passed a civics test. Well, joining us now with their opinion is our Gen Z voter panel, Campus Reform correspondents, Daniel Idfrids. How do I say your last name, Daniel? Let me say it right.
Idfrids.
I'm glad I asked. Thank you, Daniel, so much. And Robert Seeger, as well as New York Post columnist Ricky Schlott. Thanks so much for being with me. But all of you, let's start. What do you think of Vivek Ramaswamy's proposal to postpone voting age from 18 until 25? Daniel, we'll start with you.
Well, obviously with younger voters or younger Americans in general dealing with indoctrination and whatnot in schools, it may seem like a good idea among older folks, but I think there's not enough trust in younger voters to know the issues and vote accordingly.
Is that right? So I do think there's an assumption, Rob, by many that Gen Z, younger voters, overwhelmingly skew left. And at the same time, I would presume, if Vivek were sitting here with us right now, he would say, don't have a basic understanding of civics at this point. Would you agree with his premise and his solution?
Yeah, I definitely agree that the majority of my fellow generation tend to skew more to the left. But yeah, if they do a little bit of studying into the issues that affect them the most, they'd realize that, having a strong economy and the rising cost of living is a big issue, and that's more of maybe a right-wing issue. Like looking at, I was at the store the other day, I saw a pack of peanuts, and it was $4.50, honey roasted peanuts. I was like, what are we in a bee shortage or something? But they used to be 2 for 99 cents. But
well, what do you think about changing the voting age to 25, though?
I'm not too much in favor of that. I think there's plenty of smart people my age, 18 and up, and doing so would restrict their voice and the ability to participate in our democracy.
Ricky, is it 3 for 3? As in, don't want to see this voting age raised to 25?
Yeah, I'd have to say if we're civically disengaged and civically misinformed, that's the fault of our education system and not young people. And I think one way to make them less patriotic is to take away their right to vote.
So, okay, so unanimous here, no, don't want to see the proposal to raise voting age to 25. Also an acknowledgement that many, many young people vote to the left. This isn't to avoid someone voting to the left. This is, I would presume, his proposal to ensure that everyone has a stake in the game and a level of understanding of our democracy. The three of you clearly do. Ricky, as you look at this and we move forward to 2024, what's most important to you, both as issues and who reflects your important issues as a candidate?
I mean, I think for me, the most important thing is the social fabric. And I feel that I've grown up in the lesser of two evils era of American politics, where a lot of people felt deeply compromised with the choices put before them. So for me, I'm hoping to see anything but another Biden-Trump mashup, because as far as I'm aware, everyone in my circle felt very compromised by their vote last time around.
Yeah, so you want somebody new.
I would love some new blood in the game, some younger people to mix things up, and maybe some dynamic, moderate, different kind of candidates as well.
Rob, you mentioned the economy. Sounds like that's the #1 issue to you. So who speaks to that issue for you?
Almost certainly. Yeah, the rising cost of housing is another big issue. Like, I'm not sure if I'm ever going to be able to buy a house. because I know it was harder. It's going to be harder than it was for my dad to buy a house, and it's going to be much harder for me than it was for my grandpa. If you look at housing prices in like 1960, you could get a mansion for $30,000, and in today's money, that's only about $100,000. And to get a mansion for $100,000 is insane. You can't get a shed for that much today.
And which candidate has your attention when it comes to the economy?
Definitely the previous administration. Looking at the differences between the previous administration and the current one, it's obvious that they had a much better impact on the economy and able to make everyday living affordable for Americans.
So Donald Trump. And Daniel, the issues that are most important to you?
The most important issue for me is safety. Look, the Leadership Institute's campus reform has reported many instances of student activist groups trying to get their administration to defund or eliminate campus police, but I assure you that is not the opinions of most college students. I know safety is my #1 priority. I remember one time my friends and I got an email notification from campus police notifying us of a sexual assault, attempted sexual assault nearby campus. Brought the energy of my friend group down. Safety is a huge priority.
So, really quickly, Ricky said she would like to see new blood. Rob said he'd like to see a return of Donald Trump. What would you like to see when it comes to the next president?
Focus on safety, focus on crime, focus on us having a safe living environment for us to prosper in.
Okay. Before I go, and I have to go, so would Vivek have lost your vote with this proposal to raise the voting age to 25?
Well, definitely not. I see his reasoning. You know, like, we want to have stake in our society, but it doesn't help his case at all. I would say that.
All right. Ricky, Rob, Daniel, thank you all so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Coming up, with the pandemic era, Title 42 border policy expired, and a record number of illegal immigrants crossing the border is another health crisis on the horizon. And how about President Biden putting more of your taxpayer money toward research into bat coronaviruses? Yep. Dr. Mark Siegel.
We're back with a Fox News alert. Title 42 officially expired at midnight, and Friday the policy was originally in place because of the pandemic. But ironically, with the record number of migrants gathering and illegally crossing the border, could be creating a new public health crisis. Here to weigh in is Fox News medical contributor Dr. Mark Siegel. So there was this policy, Title 42, because of COVID, but it was also helping to screen for other medical or infectious diseases, correct?
And it wasn't enough even then.
Yeah.
Even when COVID was the stated reason, we're dealing with a situation which is a public health crisis by definition. Over 80,000 crossings last week alone. We don't have the ability to screen people that are coming here illegally. They're not announcing that they're coming. First of all, those regions at the border are medically underserved to begin with.
Right.
The entire region. And there's a health professional shortage there. There are no doctors. There are no nurses. There's a tremendous amount of obesity and diabetes to begin with. Then we're talking about things like tuberculosis, where 2/3 of the foreign cases come across that border. We can't treat that.
Is tuberculosis on the rise in America?
Absolutely, and this is the reason. Now, in 1900, we would screen immigrants for tuberculosis in 1900, but those were legal immigrants. So I think by definition, when you start using words like asylum, and you say that's your justification, nobody is screening people. So it's all contagious diseases are on the table here. Measles is on the rise at the border. Influenza has been a problem. COVID was just the tip of the iceberg with this, not to mention injuries of people trying to cross, motor vehicle accidents, people getting hurt.
Yeah, well,
hospitals not equipped.
I have friends who live in Yuma on the border, near the border, and last year they said their health services, their hospitals were overrun, and they were having to go an hour away to get services because they couldn't get in appointments in their own hometown.
And that was before Title 42.
That was before.
And the infectious diseases spread into the local communities.
Yeah, unbelievable. It's so unfair what's happening, and you're right. Ellis Island, people were getting screened.
My grandfather, they checked his neck to see if he had tuberculosis. They kept him there for 2 days.
Yeah.
What happens?
I know.
It's a public health emergency now.
Yeah. Well, here's another potential new public health emergency that may happen, and that is because the Biden administration is recklessly making a decision to give another $2 million of tax money to the EcoHealth Alliance to research bat coronaviruses, despite the lab leaks that we had before. How is this possibly happening? Why would anyone give $2 million to the same people who helped spread the COVID out of that Wuhan lab in the first place?
Because there's a smokescreen, Rachel, over the idea that COVID-19 likely came from a lab, even though our intelligence communities are saying so, even though the FBI is saying so. And by saying that, well, maybe it didn't, maybe it came from nature, maybe it came from a raccoon dog, we take the attention off of the issue here, which is EcoHealth Alliance, which gets 90% of its money from the government, is busy. Its jewel in its crown is working with the Wuhan Institute of Technology.
Yeah.
Ralph Barrick in North Carolina does experiments where he manipulates bat coronaviruses and makes new ones. And then those bat coronaviruses get tested, guess where? Wuhan. So not only is it likely that this spawned this pandemic, but with no brakes on the system, and now we're giving money to them again, the whole idea of a worldwide consortium of scientists manipulating viruses, to supposedly test for possible vaccines, is dangerous by definition.
Yeah, and because no one was held accountable in the first place, we're back to square one. This is the consequence of Dr. Fauci not being held accountable for giving money to EcoHealth, like his friend, Peter Daszak.
And Peter Daszak not being held accountable, and
Both
the entire consortium not being held accountable. Here we go again. Biggest risk for next pandemic is lab manipulation.
Yeah, millions and millions of people died because of it, and no consequences. All right, Dr. Mark Siegel, thanks for joining us.
Good to see you. Great to see you.
Likewise. All right, still ahead, a Marine veteran is released on a $100,000 bond after being charged in the chokehold death of Jordan Neely. Will and Pete go off the wall with how we got here and the legal hurdles ahead.
24-year-old Marine veteran Daniel Penny is now out on $100,000 bond after being charged with second-degree manslaughter in the subway chokehold death of Jordan Neely.
But what exactly happened, and what should we expect going forward? Let's go off the wall to learn more. First, let's start with Daniel Penny. As we mentioned, he's facing second-degree manslaughter charges in that death in the subway. You've heard it time and time again, 24-year-old Marine. He was a 300 series in MOS, meaning he was a rifleman. He was an infantryman in the Marine, deployed to the Mediterranean with a Marine Expeditionary Unit for 4 years, got out as an E5, a sergeant, honorable discharge. So as a rifleman, that means he was part of a combat unit.
Second-degree charges, by the way, point us toward would a reasonable person presume that he acted recklessly or with indifference to Jordan Neely's life. As we point out, he lived in Queens. He's from Long Island. I think this is actually an important detail, Pete, as we talked about throughout the morning. Yeah. It probably means, like any New Yorker, he's had a lot of these interactions on the subway, and my presumption would be that if he felt there was some need to intervene with Jordan Neely and what was perhaps about to take place on the train that day, it would have gone above and beyond the normal experiences of what a New Yorker experiences.
I think that's a really important point. If you're familiar with that ecosystem, then you can handle small things that you just brush aside.
It's still white knuckle often. It's often like, oh, is this going to explode into violence?
As we mentioned, discharged in 2021. That haircut he's got right now wouldn't cut it back in the day. So he's been out for a couple of years at this point.
Now, who is Jordan Neely? Jordan Neely is a man. I believe he was in his 30s. He was in his 30s.
I think so.
And his mother, he's 30 years old, yes. His mother died when he was 14. She was strangled by her boyfriend. It's said by his family this was a seminal moment in Jordan Neely's life where he then began, Pete, to spin out of control.
Yeah, quickly. He had 42 prior arrests between 2013 and 2021. So the media's making a lot about he was a subway performer and Michael Jackson impersonator, but it was a cycle of violence and mental health problems, including cold cocking and sucker punching people on the subway, 2 at 1 month apart, breaking one victim's nose in 2019, punching a 64-year-old man in the face. He also was charged with attempted kidnapping of a 7-year-old girl, dragging her down the street and put in jail for 4 months. After that, he punched a 67-year-old woman in the face, breaking her nose.
Jordan Neely's attorney, which he has in death and apparently didn't have in life, Jordan Neely's attorney has pointed out there's no way that Daniel Penny would have known Neely's criminal history. Well, there's something else that that Daniel Penny wouldn't have known. He wouldn't have known that Jordan Neely was a Michael Jackson impersonator. He wouldn't have known what he looked like when he was 20 years old. What he would have known was the violent, potentially volatile man on the subway making threats that day in the state and condition and visual appearance that he was in that day. That's what's relevant to this interaction.
He and all the other passengers, by the way, who gave him credit for the actions that he took, thanked him for stepping up when no one else would. But this is all after what actually happened on the subway. And we're going to play that 15-second video once and give you a sense of our take as well. Here's the video. That Marine that goes through basic training and certainly infantry training goes through the Marine Corps Martial Arts program. So he'd have basic training here. Is that a chokehold? There's also something known as a sleeper hold. That looks like the rear naked chokehold. By the way, in the Army, we had a combatives program. That's the most secure hold you can have on someone. You effectively have them here. You got their legs below them. And when he let him go into a recovering position, we're told Jordan Neely was still breathing. So from the Marines' perspective, he's not trying to kill him. He's trying to subdue him. It'll be in a jury's hands to see whether or not he went too far at making a moment's notice call.
A few other bullet points of note. Witnesses say Neely was said to be shouting, acting erratically. The reports he said something to the effect of, "I'll take a bullet." Clearly was implicating that he is up for a moment of violence. The interaction took place for up to 15 minutes. We haven't seen the full 15-minute video. And two other riders helped restrain Neely. Several witnesses on the train that day, as you point out, thanked Daniel Penny for what he did.
If you want to just confront someone by punching him, you escalate the situation. If you come from behind with a sleeper hold or a rear naked, you're trying to subdue and stop the situation from happening. Right. And I think what you'll hear this Marine say is, no one's trying to kill anybody here. I'm trying to protect myself and the other people in a bad situation.
In the wake of this, you immediately saw protests in New York City where riders jumped down onto a subway tracks, stopped a car, held everyone else onto the train. You know, the one detail that has seemingly inspired this is the detail that we haven't mentioned here because it isn't pertinent to the case. And that's the detail of the two men's race. Yeah. The protest in the wake are about that one detail.
And that's the detail that Mayor Adams brought up later on after the protest. Mayor Adams at the beginning said, let's wait for all the information. Let's get the toxicology report of Jordan Neely, which we still don't have. Let's get all the videos and all the witness testimony. But after the protests, as often happens, Mayor Adams says, no, maybe this is a race situation. So what are the consequences now that he faces second-degree manslaughter charges? It's a lot for the action that he took.
Yeah, as we pointed out, he's been released on a $100,000 bond. If he is convicted of manslaughter in the second degree, he could face as many as 15 years in prison.
He can't leave New York State as of right now, so he's effectively a prisoner of the city and the state.
Surrendered his passport.
Surrendered his passport. He's got by the way, he has a Give, Send, Go fund. I just tweeted it. It's out there. It was at $100,000 just on Thursday. It's at $800,000 right now for his legal defense fund. So a lot of Americans stepping up and saying, I want to support this Marine who took courageous action, and now they're coming after him in the process.
All right, that's what we know so far when it comes to this case. Let's toss it over to Rachel now.
Yeah.
A little more.
I noticed it's on Give, Send, Go and not GoFundMe, which often deplatform people they don't agree with. So thank you, Pete. Thank you, Will. Great stuff. The city of Baltimore now joining the list of Democrat-led cities suing Hyundai and Kia for failing to prevent theft of their vehicles. The suit against the car companies come as Baltimore struggles to get a handle on soaring crime, including a nearly 100% increase in auto thefts from this time last year. So far this year, nearly 600 Kias and Hyundais have been stolen in Baltimore as the mayor blames faulty anti-theft technology, not the thieves. All right. A new report from Zillow predicts mortgage rates could spike as high as 22% if the U.S. defaults on its debt. One expert warning a sharp increase in rates could send the real estate market into a, quote, deep freeze. The clock is ticking for the federal government to take action. The Treasury Secretary says the U.S. could default on its debt as soon as June 1st. Buckingham Palace unveiling King Charles III's official coronation photo. The newly crowned monarch is seen in the throne room with his son, Prince William, and grandson, Prince George, bringing together the royal line of succession. And those are your headlines. Let's check in with meteorologist Adam Klotz for our Fox weather forecast. Adam, good morning.
Hey, good morning. A little bit balmy out here on Fox Square as we're seeing fairly warm temperatures across the entire eastern half of the country. Not the case absolutely everywhere. Let's dive right into those temperatures. A lot of 60s, 72 degrees, one of the warm spots on the map here in New York City. It is cooler off towards the west, and it's right in the middle of the country where all the action has been. There's been a lot of rain and thunderstorms, some tornadoes across Nebraska yesterday. We do see a severe storm threat once again today across Illinois and into Iowa, and also a slight severe storm threat there across portions of South Texas. Rachel, those are your weather headlines. For now, tossing it back inside to you.
All right. Thank you, Adam. All right, still ahead, could your future flight be flown by an AI pilot? Kurt the Cyber Guy is next.
你要玩的吗？没有就继续。呀，从新到2满星。